Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Podcast. This is the 26th episode, marking 1 year of podcasts.
Assuming that they've all come out at an even spread of 2 weeks each.
They haven't, but mostly they have, to be fair. Mostly.
Yes. Yeah, we missed, there's 1 week, but
I think we're pretty close. So for our special event, for our special 1 year event, Barry came to see me, and now we're in the same room.
And now we're in the same room. This is what a podcast would look like if we were more on it.
If we were living in the same city.
Yeah.
If we had a budget for transport.
Yeah, teleporters, because I'm not doing that trip again. 5 hours to get here from London.
Which it shouldn't take, but...
No, train problems.
Yeah, don't get us started on British Rail.
Oh. British Rail's not a thing anymore.
Yeah. No, don't get us started on the state of rail in this country. That could be a whole podcast on its own, and I'm sure it is.
And I'm sure that's what you want, is two white guys talking politics in a podcast.
Politics and trains are two favorite board game things.
Yeah, Hegemony and Ticket to Ride come together.
That's all we're going to be reviewing in this episode. No, we're not actually talking about either of those. We're going to talk about the news for a while, and then we're going to talk about the games we've been playing. So, Barry, what do we got in the news?
So, biggest news for me, potentially, is the League of Legends trading card game. And that is called Riftbound. However, I don't know much more about it. It was announced, they put a website up. The guys that do League of Legends, obviously big company, have a lot behind it. However, they do have a failed CCG behind them, digital CCG, Runeterra,
right?
If you recall. And now I believe Runeterra is still going. I never played it. It was hailed as the next big thing, and then everybody... The economy of it didn't work, and...
So that was sort of like a Hearthstone.
It was more like Hearthstone, and It was like, as far as I remember, there was multiple fields you fought on, maybe a little bit like Altered, which is another trading card game, and everybody said the mechanisms behind it were great, and everybody jumped ship to it when it first came out. Everybody came over from Hearthstone, came over from Gwent at the time, and then it just died. And I don't necessarily know why. Not as hard as Artifact, Steam's CCG, but still, I believe it's no longer held in quite such high regard or played very much. I think there's a player versus enemy version, and I just don't think PvP gets played anymore. So we'll see how this pans out. A new CCG, I don't need to get involved in that, and certainly not one that might die after a couple of years. But
this new Riftbound, that's a physical thing.
Physical card game, yeah. So
okay.
I've seen...
So it's the team from Runeterra have decided to do a physical thing.
Well, the team behind League of Legends, I assume a lot of the guys from Runeterra are going to take what they've learned to...
They could draw upon the Mechs and Minions people as well, right? That's
yes,
League of Legends too.
That was same guys. So yeah, they obviously they seem passionate about board games at least, right? They're into that as well. Makes sense. Good crossover, kind of interest at crossover. Whether that will translate into a good physical card game, and now I'm thinking about it. I never played Runeterra, so I'm only
speculating.
Yes, I'm actually only speculating it was the same guys as well. I think it was. Runeterra's League, right? I don't remember.
Runeterra is the World League of Legends operating.
Okay, fine, because I never touched it once. I was Gwent diehard at that point. never going to leave it. And then I left it.
And now it's dead. No, Gwent's coming back.
And that's it. As soon as I leave something,
it's done. That's how you know. If you can't keep Barry interested, and this is Barry's thing, then it's just not good enough.
Yeah.
All right, get better card game, guys. No, but we don't know. We'll have to check that out. Or you'll check it out and let me know because I don't play.
I probably will. Yes, I'll get at least a starter or two, see what the gameplay's like. But there are a number of good card games already. It's got to do something a bit different.
Yeah. Speaking of card games that are new but are not doing stuff different, are instead doing the stuff the same, isn't there another new card game that's doing stuff the same?
Another new card game that's doing stuff. Well, actually, I was going to talk about that for played because I have played the game.
Oh, okay. We'll save that for later then. Stick around. That's
a
teaser. That's called a teaser.
I could talk about card games that are also dead.
Yes, a card game has died, so Barry bought it all for posterity.
Yeah. So the game Vampire the Masquerade, this World of Darkness, Rivals, so produced by Renegade, was announced to be ending with no more cards to come just this week. And Vampire the Masquerade Rivals, you may be aware there's already another Vampire the Masquerade card game. What's it called? I don't want to say Jihad. What's it called?
Bloodlines?
No. I can't believe. Vitez. The Eternal Struggle. Vampire the Eternal Struggle.
How did you get from Jihad to...
It was originally called Jihad, so Jyhad. That was its original name before it was rebranded as Vampire the Eternal Struggle.
Okay. For marketing reasons.
Yeah, I think it was Richard Garfield as well. Now, that's Vampire the Eternal Struggle has come back as a sort of print-on-demand, sort of living card game style system and compared to the collectible card game. Vampire the Masquerade Rivals was like the little brother to that game that still had some of the politicking and some of the sort of broader mechanisms, but it wasn't as in-depth. So Vampire the Eternal Struggle wants you to have 5 players all working towards your own agendas and doing your own thing. Vampire the Masquerade Rivals wants you to have 4 players, so you're already saving some time there. And then you've got a single rival, and the game would end as soon as somebody was knocked out. Is one of the ways to end the game, or you achieve your agenda. And if you knocked out your rival, you would win. If you achieved your agenda, you would win. If somebody else knocked a player out that wasn't their rival, you would add up the points and see who's got the most points. And I remember it coming out 2021, so the game is only 4 years old, give or take. Has a number of expansions, but I never played it, and neither did anybody else by the by the looks of things. They must have put out about half, 8 expansions between sort of big and small packs, and they then expanded into the rest of the World of Darkness, which is the werewolves and the hunters and everything else that comes along with that. And people didn't like that as much, it seems, and so they've kind of ended it like that. And so, yes, everything was available half price on Renegade's website. Click. And, but I've had to go hunting proper because not everything was on the UK store. The European store had to have a couple of things, and they don't ship to the UK. And the US store has a couple of things that doesn't ship to the UK. And then finally, there's 10 cards that were only released as convention exclusives. And so they're the ones to track them next.
So you didn't manage to get the 10 cards?
I've not got the 10 cards. I've got everything else coming.
How did you get the European and American stuff?
So the American ones have already got something set up to shipping forwards. Okay. And a friend in Europe I've sent the cards to. Hopefully they'll be able to forward them on that way.
Right, there we go. Global logistics to make sure Barry doesn't miss out on any of that gameplay.
Yeah, and because it's just what I need, another box full of dead card game. If you ever were to see my walls.
Well, I'm going to come down there and play them because I never play any card games. I never get to play.
Oh, sad.
There we go. I can take a trip through history. Set up a museum. Well,
we've recently been going through every quarter-ish an LCG day, so the Fantasy Flight ones. So, we go back and we play all the decks, and I've got a bunch of sort of sparring decks made up where you just pick them up and play. The problem is some games are easier to learn than others, so the popular ones are the easier games. The games that require a bit of knowledge and know-how, people are like, I didn't like that so much. It's like, well, yeah, because you don't know the game.
Yeah.
So trying to get people that used to play back in.
Well, I think it's tricky with these because they're lifestyle games, right? So they're sort of designed around the idea that you could immerse yourself in the rules and the lore and the construction and sort of live that for years on end.
Yeah.
And it would have enough complexity and nuance to maintain that kind of investment of people's attention. But, so a lot of them, I think, do struggle to be accessible to people that just haven't
as a board game night.
As a board game night thing. Yeah.
So it's tricky, but I've got many more to still get played.
That's not going to stop Barry trying.
No. It's, and I'll add this to the list.
Well, there we go.
Any new games you spotted?
So, Brian Lockett is the founder of Red Raven Games, designer, auteur, artist, musician, does all of his own stuff for his own games. You will come across some of them at some point in this hobby, Above and Below, the Sleeping Gods stuff, the Little Box Rome. Lockett's done art for other games as well, but lots of titles from Red Raven Games and what's the space one? Empires of the Void. There's Ancient City of the Ancients, I think, something like that. Anyway, lots of them. And the original long ago 2012 release, 8-Minute Empire, which was a territory control game you could play in 8 minutes.
One of the first games I think we played together.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, and that would have been a long time ago. So there was a follow-up called, I want to say Legends. It might have been 8-Minute Legends, which introduced into the game the concept of text on cards, so they did more stuff. And then now Six Sojourn, which is live on GameFound at this very minute, and includes, I believe, a sort of fleshed out, bigger version of the game, even more than Legends. So I haven't played Legends. I've only played 8-Minute Empire. 8-Minute Empire really is, it's a board and it's cubes, and you're putting cubes out to take over the territories on the board. And functionally all it is a river of cards. Someone buys a card from the offering, and then everything slides to the left and repopulates. Cards go up in price the further, the closer you get to the deck. So, newer cards cost more. If you want to pick something up, the cards have two functions. When you get them, they give you an action to do on the board, which is put out more troops, build a city, or move your troops around. And they also give you a set collection vibe. And inevitably, the most valuable set collection stuff is on the least good cards. So it's a way of balancing it. Are you trying to win the board state game, or are you trying to win the set collection game, or a bit of both? Ideally, you're managing both. And you buy the cards with money, and everyone starts the game with the same amount of money. You can't earn any more, and if you blow through all your money, you're always stuck taking the free card, which sucks. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole game. And it does take 8 to 20 minutes to play. And
Miss no more.
in the advanced mode of the game, it suggests playing 3 times and adding up your scores across all 3 games to see who the overall winner is. It's quick, and it's a good amount of game for how long, and it's a tiny box. The box could have even been half the size because it's got one of those valley board inserts. Yeah. But you could chuck that out. You could fit it in like one of those deck boxes, that you buy. Except the board is just a bit too big for that. If you had a fold-up mat, a printout of the board, you can just print it on an A4, fold that up, bring it with you. But Six Sojourns is offering that same experience, but now it goes up to 40 minutes. I think there's an additional 5th player. Or maybe 8-Minute Empire goes up to, I think it's 4 players. It might have been 5. Anyway. It probably wants to be sort of 3 or 4 players anyway. It is area control after all, although it's very binary area control. And most of the competition there comes from the action inefficiency. It's hard to move people around. It's hard to, because you only get, the game end's trigger is you bought X number of cards. And you get fewer cards the more players there are. And in the 3-player game, I think you get 10 cards, and that's the whole game. So, and then it just ends. So very limited number of actions. I thought Six Sojourns looked interesting. I'm not sure if I'm going to back it just because I have 8-Minute Empire, and I also know someone who's backing it. But, it's got, it's not Barry, but it's got it's got the cards from Legends. What Legends added, again, was text to those cards. So now they do something else other than just actions and set collection. And then I think it's got that system, and then it's got some kind of economy system where the value, I think, of the goods you're getting from the set collection changes. But, I like Lockett's games generally. I found them to be, on the whole, very competent and very well realized. His art's very cute and appealing, and he does it all himself, which is great. So, and also the other thing is he tends to crowdfund these things when it's largely done. You know, so it's for him a distribution system more than, because he's got enough games within his company now. Bearing in mind that the company is very, very small. I believe it's just kind of him and his immediate family.
Well, he does it all, right?
Yeah, well, he does all of the creative stuff, I think. He might have some people helping him with the logistics and the finances and stuff like that. But, you know, it's certainly still very much an auteur kind of operation. But yeah, so I thought, you know, that looks interesting, and I like 8-Minute Empire well enough. It's a good way to fill. If you've got like 20 minutes to an hour, and you're like, we don't really know how long we've got, you can just play it once, or you can play it 3 times, or twice, or whatever, and it's good enough. It's entertaining enough. I think after 3 games, I'm definitely like, you know, let's play something more now, please. But, you know, the box is tiny, super quick to set up, super quick to teach.
I don't think I've played it since that first time we played it, and so I don't really remember it. But
I mean, I think it's more interesting at higher counts, because at 2 players, it's just head to head. Every loss is a gain.
Yeah.
You know, and so they're like, the game is so simple. At least with 3 players, you've got a little bit more of sort of like, who's winning, what's the balance. And then in the advanced mode, where you play 3 games back to back, you've also got who won the first game, how are we going to balance out the scores a bit. Having said that, what I have noticed is that the scores between sort of players of equal skill, or players who are relatively on the ball, tend to kind of be like 1 or 2 points in it. You know, and their scores are typically around sort of 12 to 15. So it's not a game, I think, where you can sort of get into massive...
Yeah, like a big swing on that 3rd game to come back or whatever.
Yeah, I think the big swings are only going to happen when people are unfamiliar with the game. And that only takes 1 game, and then suddenly they're on the ball. You know, and so then the interest really is like just around sort of balancing everything out. And actually then the tie break comes in, which is interesting, which is who spent the least coins. So then there's something about like sort of being efficient with the cards you're buying, because functionally, if you're playing in a 3-player game, you're playing 10 cards, you have 11 coins. So you can buy 1 coin per card and 1 card for 2, and then you blow through all the coins. But if there's a tie, you want to have the most coins. I don't know how that works in the advanced mode, though. If there's no,
but you can take a free card to save some money.
Always take a free card to save some money.
So yeah, it's working out whether it's worth it, I guess, to take a further card or just get what you're given.
Get what you're given. Well, sometimes, you know, you might just let something sit there on the 0 space, pretend you don't want it, and then you might be like, oh,
later on, yoink,
I did want that. Rused.
In your face. Well, we'll come back to people kickstarting things as a pre-order system, I guess, in just a moment.
Yes, that's very relevant to another topic we're going to get to in a minute.
But the bit of news this week is that Konieczka, a very well-respected and long-standing designer in the board game community, has announced his retirement. Wants to move on to do something else. I'm not convinced he's managed to make his millions in board games, although he's been involved in games that have sold in the millions. His final product, and I forget which company he's with, but he is, I believe, wrapping up his design career with the next... He's got something in the works, and he's got the 2nd season of the Mandalorian board game still to come out. And I think he's finished up something else that's not yet announced and going to be kind of handed off to the publisher to finish up and release to the world. But wish him all the best. Played some very good games. He's very involved in space games, Star Wars games, so worked for FFG for a number of years and then went on to do...
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. He worked as a sort of designer and developer at FFG, particularly when they were making games and making good games.
Remember that?
Remember those
Pepperidge
days?
Farm remembers.
Those halcyon days. But then he left and he found Unexpected Games, which was his company where he was going to make his own games and sort of do what he wanted, and complete creative freedom. And tragically, they've just not made any really good games.
Yeah. It also turns out the kind of games that he wanted to make were very much like the games he used to make at FFG. So, some of them. The Mando is
the Mando's the one. Well, I mean, I think he only did 4 games at unexpected games so far that I'm thinking of. The first one was The Initiative, which was like a story sort of based puzzle solving thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was more for kids. That was quite accessible. The next one was Voices in My Head, which I didn't play, but it had Rodney Smith on the front.
That's who's in my head.
That's what I remember about the box. I'll show it to you here because it'll be on screen for the people who watch the podcast. But there you go. This was the box art for Voices in My Head.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I recognise the art, but you tell me that's Rodney.
I mean, don't you think so?
No.
No. Well, then we'll have to.
Because as a person who's seen Rodney Smith,
I've met him a bunch of times. What are you talking about? I think it looks just like him. Anyway, then he did something called 3,000 Scoundrels, which was like a Western game, which I didn't get to play either.
That was a card crafter.
Was it?
Yeah, you would end up putting accessories onto your cards to
did you play it?
I've not played it, but it is on. Well, actually, I don't know if it's in beta yet.
Oh, okay. It's coming soon to a playable platform near you.
Yes.
And then finally, The Mandalorian Adventures. We don't know if there is more in the pipeline. There might be. Well, you said there was another Mando, and then maybe one more thing.
Yeah.
And then retirement. Yeah, because the last thing listed is the Clan of Two expansion for Mando. But he's had he's had hits and misses, of course, like every designer. I think he worked on I want to say Discover.
Oh, is that the
Lands Unknown? Discover Lands Unknown.
Every box was different.
Yeah, which was terrible. But let us not forget, he also worked on Twilight Imperium, Star Wars Rebellion. He worked on
Battlestar Galactica,
and the StarCraft board game as well.
Yeah.
Without which there would be no
Forbidden Stars.
Forbidden Stars. Without StarCraft the board game, there would be no Forbidden Stars either. So, although I think personally StarCraft is better.
Never played it.
We grew up playing StarCraft, and then it was my friend's copy, so I never bought it. And then I bought Forbidden Stars, and I played it, and I was like, "Oh, this is like the same, but with more frustrating combat."
Fair.
But I like them both. But they are big, long, all-day affairs.
Yeah. But there's some other news actually. There's a new StarCraft game coming out.
Oh, I saw that, the miniatures game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see that.
But I don't know enough about it, whether it is a proper skirmish mini game or if it's a huge Warhammer style. Archon Studio are making it. What did Archon Studio do? I have heard that name before.
I do know Archon Studios.
Yeah, Heroes of Might and Magic. So it might be more skirmishy and board gamey. Although I don't know which of the He-Man games they made. There's two He-Man games. One is kind of, I want to say like Heroescapey. You've got your cards for your units and you move around on a hex grid. Yes, that is them. Yeah. So maybe it's more board gamey. And it would kind of make sense. Actually, both would make sense, fine. Well, the tabletop game's launching next year. It's two things. Tabletop game next year. Board games 2027. StarCraft, yeah.
It's a re-implementation of the existing board game, or
I
a new
wouldn't
thing?
have thought so. I would have thought they're new.
Brand new thing.
Yeah. There's not a huge amount of information.
Well, if you are a fan of the old StarCraft game, which is really all about the hidden order stacking system, will always remember Corey Konieczka for that. And it is a pity that that system has been lost to time, what with Forbidden Stars and StarCraft being out of print. But you never know. They might come back around. People often announce their retirement in this industry, and then somebody's like, but what about big box version now that the rights are in question?
Up in the air. Yeah.
So here's hoping some of those classics come back around.
Nice. But then, as we were saying, people using Kickstarter as pre-order platforms, or more broadly, how expensive is that going to get?
Well, we thought we'd do a bit of coverage on the tariffs because there's been a lot of stuff going around and maybe you haven't had a chance to catch up on it or read it all. And there is, honestly, despite the fact that it's very significant and everyone's talking about it, there's actually not that much to say. You know, there is really obviously two models for the distribution of games in this industry. And one is the sort of crowdfunding model, and the other is the retail model. And the crowdfunding model, the benefit is that companies, publishers, will sell directly to consumers. And there may be more parties involved in that. So what I'm trying to say is that the retail model is historically a number of entities, right? Like it is the designers, it is the publisher who's picked it up from the designer, might be the designer's company, often it is, but it could be other companies. And then the publisher will sell to distributors who tend to be sort of national distributors, and they'll distribute to their retailers nationally. So you'll have a distributor for, the UK, or it used to be Europe. There used to be European distributors. Now we tend to have UK distributors thanks to leaving the EU. But, in America, you would have a lot of localized distributors who are going out to a number of states, for example, because it's just a much bigger country. And then that means that each sale at the point of sale has to kick back to the retailer, the distributor, the publisher, and the designer, sort of up the chain, right? Well, that's not strictly true because they pay at the point of, they've paid each other already. So when the distributor buys them from the publisher, they'll buy a consignment, a number of copies, pay the publisher then. So it is incumbent on the current holder of the product to sell it and make money. Yeah. What crowdfunding does is functionally it allows that publisher or even the designer to go straight to the point of sale, bypassing potentially the publisher, distributor, and retailer, right? And we see often as well the publisher or designer who's running the Kickstarter campaign potentially will even take on the role of distributor, offering something like a retailer pledge. So a single store will pledge to the campaign and get a consignment of product, which will be shipped to them directly from the publisher and or designer, right? So, of course, it's more complex based on the logistics of where the games are coming from, how they're going to do localization. We've seen a lot of companies traditionally, Cool Mini or Not is a good example of this, who will ship everything to the States and then distribute it worldwide from there. For whatever reason, it was easier for them not to have national localized distributors, international localized distributors. So they wouldn't have a European arm, but they'd just bring everything from their Chinese manufacturing area, where they did have an office and their own sort of presence in Asia. And they'd ship all of that stuff to the US to distribute it. And then I think lately, actually, over the last wee while, they've been moving distribution to Asia. So they'll distribute worldwide from there, which makes sense, really, especially now in light of the US tariffs. But where the US tariffs come in, is they apply specifically to goods being imported into the United States. And so that means that if you are a company that has international distribution, if you've got a distribution partner in Europe, for example, and you're manufacturing in China, that consignment will not necessarily be affected by US tariffs, because you could go directly from China to Europe straight to backers, right? And even if you were a publisher or something like that, and you had that same system set up, you could still bypass the US tariffs. Where it gets a bit more complex is if you're someone like Simon who brings everything into the US, you have to pay the tariff on everything, and then you send it back out worldwide. Well, you just can't do that anymore, or at least you won't want to, because you're taking a 50% tax on all of that consignment. The big impacts really are going to affect for longer supply chains, right? So the retail stuff is going to be worst affected because of the way the profit margin is carved up, right? You've got some profit for the designer, some profit for the publisher, some profit for the distributor, and some profit for the retail company. And so because the profits are effectively being divided into four, and everybody needs that profit to pay their overheads and then pay their staff and ultimately grow their company and make profit and money, there's less room to absorb increased costs at any point. And so if you think about when that import tax, when that tariff is going to be paid, it's likely paid by the publisher bringing in the consignment, right? whether or not that publisher is, for example, a company like Stonemaier, which is owned by Jamie Stegmaier, who tends to also be the designer, or if it's, a company like FFG, which has their own in-house team of designers and will often buy prototypes from outside the company as well. They would still, FFG would still be the publisher bringing in that consignment and then sending it out from there. That loss, they can't, the publisher could absorb that entire tariff, but their profit would be so heavily impacted because, they're looking at a 50% tariff. So if your manufacturing cost on a game is $10, right? And then you want to sell it for $20 to distributors, and then they want to sell it for, $40 to retail, who are then going to sell it for $60 on the shelf. Now you're not going to be able to do that, right? So you're going to have to add $5 on and onto the original thing that's coming in. Look, and then it's going to have this knock-on effect as everyone's adding on their sort of their percentage and their margin, right, for profit. If your product is retailing at $60 and you are going directly to the consumer, and you've got a $10 manufacturing, you've got $50 of profit margin in there. Now this is obviously going to cover stuff like your overheads, so staff, art potentially, anything that's not direct manufacturing. So if it's $10 to buy the unit from China, that doesn't account for, the designer's cut, the development time, the artists, or anyone who's working in your customer service or anything like that, right? So all of that's got to be covered as well. But you will have, if you're retailing at $60, a $50 profit margin to cover all of those overheads plus the tariffs. So that's where you would soak those tariffs, right? So ultimately, if your plan is to try and soak tariffs without increasing your shelf cost, you will have to bypass distributors and retailers because you won't be able to cut them in to those profit margins anymore. And even, consider, downsizing your company, you'll certainly have less room for growth and less comfort to take risks or work on risky projects that you don't think might be as profitable. There's also the matter of order numbers. The bigger a print run is, the cheaper the cost of the individual items, because to an extent the manufacturer has to do retooling and set up their machines to manufacture your product. And so the bigger the print run, the more it's able to absorb those costs. And so the overall cost of each individual unit will go down. And so if you are looking at, smaller print runs of more bespoke games, those will become less viable because they'll have individual costs that are higher, the tariffs will affect them more, and you'll be looking at making less money, and potentially, if you don't expect them to sell as well, even having leftover stock, which is pretty awful. So I think, the natural conclusion of this is that, board game companies are going to suffer. We're going to see less risky products, less products that are sort of interesting or bespoke or niche, and we're going to see a much bigger drive towards direct to consumer distribution, like pre-orders, crowdfunding, and that sort of thing. And ultimately what it's really going to do is harm distributors and retailers most of all, because they're the ones that are going to be cut out in favor of platforms like GameFound and Kickstarter.
Yeah, like your friendly local game store is probably the one most at risk from all of this. There's a lot to consider. Not least of all, we still don't know how these tariffs are going to shake out in their final form necessarily. Things change quite quickly on
the ground.
Yeah.
In this administration. Yeah, I mean, I think, but that business uncertainty is also damaging, right? If they come around and say, well, actually, 6 months from now we'll bring tariffs back down. That's,
you won't be getting that money back.
Well, 6 months. It's also 6 months of businesses that haven't been able to sort of commit to stuff, right?
Yeah. The again, not to turn this into a two white dudes talking politics podcast, which I know you're all clamouring for. We've got the mics, we've got the studio. We're good to go.
People have been asking, when are two cis white guys going to sit down and get into politics?
Yeah, that's what people want.
I'd really like to hear from two people that have no experience and just an amateur interest.
What they really want is one person pretending they're talking to somebody else just off screen, making TikToks as if they were on a real podcast. In terms of the tariffs, they've obviously not set up anything within the US to boost the manufacturing process there.
Right, they haven't talked about their industrial strategy.
Yeah, right. So there's no real clear way for companies now to create their products within the US if that's what they wanted to do. Certainly not at the price points that they can get from China.
Well, what they've said is that for American manufacturing at the moment, and we know, for example, Dominion is a game that is manufactured in the US. And what the US can do is card games. They've got some companies that can do card games.
Yeah.
But, if you want one of your big fancy Kickstarters with the miniatures, and we've just seen now they've got all the two-tone miniatures, with the clear plastic halves and things like that. All of that fancy stuff, that's not going to come from American manufacturing. And the other thing is, it's kind of my limited understanding is that a blanket tariff like this doesn't really help an industrial strategy. As the pundits have been pointing out, there are a lot of things that are being tariffed that America doesn't produce.
Yeah.
Just
including raw goods to make stuff.
Well, the examples they were giving were things like rice, coffee, stuff that's just not really common. So it doesn't really make sense to put tariffs on them because you're not protecting your internal industries and you're not promoting those. And typically as well, it's sort of desirable to start with national incentives to promote that, because the other thing is, if a company came out and said, well, look, all these American distributors now want to make their big miniatures games, their Nemesis and whatever here in the States, so we're going to start setting that up. All of the machines that make those things are made in China.
Yeah.
So then you're going to have to pay to get those in. With all the tariffs, your startup costs are going to be screwed. So you need then to have started already with the strategy of, we're going to start, manufacturing stuff and promoting that. So it's it's sort of like putting the cart before the horse a little bit, it feels like, unfortunately. But so for what it means now, anyway, in the immediate reality is that we might see, particularly from American publishers and designers, a lot more card games that they can produce in America. Barry likes card games.
Love a card game. And then when they go back and there'll be dead card games, I'll love them even more.
Barry likes nothing more than a complete set of cards.
Correct.
Gameplay all in.
I don't care how it plays, as long as I've got them all.
So I don't think we have much more to add on tariffs, unfortunately. Board game companies are going to be looking for ways to adapt. They're all going to be affected. There's, I think, an expectation that even though it could be that price rises were consigned to Americans, it is probably more likely that the price rises will be minimized as much as possible in America by distributing them evenly across global distribution, which means it's unlikely to see, a $15 hike in America and then globally it stays the same, right? Like more likely to see a sort of a $3 hike across the board for everyone, and just
which is a little unfair, as we other countries pay VAT already. So the 20% you pay on top of your Kickstarter prices for getting something shipped to the UK, that's a UK tax, right? Which is different from a tariff, but functionally.
Well, as far as the consumer is concerned, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's all kicking back to the national government as well. The VAT goes to our government, the tariffs will go to the American government. So, I mean, in many ways, it's just another tax.
Yeah.
Anyway, odds are much bigger increase in crowdfunding, much bigger increase in, GameFound has been running as a pre-order site for a while. They've done pre-orders for June War for Arrakis. They're doing a pre-order system for the Six Siege reprint from Steamforge Games. So I suspect we'll see that happening a lot more with publishers and designers just going straight to
Consumers.
Yeah, consumers that way.
Get the money first.
Yeah, well, exactly right. Also get those numbers so you can minimize that manufacturing cost. Because if you know how many copies you're selling, and this is the other thing, like Stonemeyer will talk about, or Jamie Stegmeyer from Stonemeyer Games will talk about, taking the big risk of printing so many copies of Wingspan because he believed in it, and that paid off. But that kind of gamble is going to come with a much bigger risk now, because if you can't sell those copies and you paid all those tariffs on them, that's a huge, big issue.
Yep.
So we'll have to see. But expect games to get more expensive. And just to politely remind you all, we are an independent operation who offers what we hope to be independent, insightful, and useful reviews. And so as games get more and more expensive, hopefully our reviews will help guide you to the ones that are right for you.
Good sales pitch, Mike.
Well, I actually believe we're trying to add value here.
I'm just along for the lols.
Barry just wants to let you know he got the all-in gameplay.
Yeah. Want to talk card games? I'm here.
I tracked it down. I've got the penguin, the penguin from that one thing that nobody got.
Love chasing down a promo, love it. But not as much
all of its own.
as I love playing games.
I want to know about what Barry's been playing.
Yeah, so the a few things. Some on Board Game Arena. Love an online board game too. And one of the main ones I've been playing is Welcome to the Moon. So this is part of the Welcome to series of games from Blue Cocker Games, designed by Alexis Allard and Benoit Turpin. And the artist on this one is Anne Heideseek. Not hide and seek, just Heideseek. If you're unfamiliar with the Welcome to series, it is a flip and write, which is where you'll flip over 3 cards, which have numbers 1 through 15. You'll pick 1 card for the number, 1 card for the suit, which each card has, and then you will mark something on your board, because they are dry erase now these days, not just bits of paper. You'll mark something on your board to try and get you the most points. So if you did the 15 of robots, you would mark the 15 in a matching space, something where it's valid to be played. The robot would have a special power depending on the map that you're playing, the board that you're using, and then you'd be working against your opponents to try and make the most effective use of the cards. Everybody uses the same 3 cards every turn, but the choices they make are going to differ.
Maybe. I mean, it's important to remember that when you're setting up that draft, the pairs are set, so you're choosing a number and a symbol that are together. You can't pick them independently, so you don't have completely free choice. So you've got to prioritize, and people can pick the same offering as well. So you've been playing Welcome to the Moon on BGA on the solo mode?
Yes, on the solo mode. So they have the first 3 missions from the series. There's 8 in the normal box, and which also includes a campaign and things that change up each of those boards slightly. And in the solo mode, you are picking 1 card for the number, 1 card for the suit, and discarding the 3rd card to the automa for their points.
Right, so it's a different system to multiplayer.
Different system for multiplayer where you're more locked in with what your choices are. You're not choosing independently. There's more flexibility in solo mode, particularly as you get to the higher levels of automa difficulty, because what you give them is very important in terms of how many points they score. So they have the first 3 missions, as I mentioned, on Board Game Arena. The remaining 5 missions they are willing to implement, or the developer is willing to implement, but as far as I'm aware, it's a case of developer money. It's not free to do, the amount of time to implement a new board, because mission is different. What you use the robots for in Mission 2, for example, is connecting to space stations to grow your plants. In Mission 3, you're using the robots to connect hibernation pods or habitable pods, working your way towards the main base. And in subsequent ones, they do something different again. So each mission you play is very different for what you're trying to achieve. But the other core part is, of course, that the numbers go up, right? So you're working in a set order, low numbers to high numbers, typically. And that is part of the restriction of what you can play and what benefits you'll get for your cards and icons. But it is a roll and write, but in this case, a flip and write, where you're filling in little boxes and trying to get the high score.
Yep. And so, fans of the show who've listened to it before will know that I'm not a big fan of roll and writes. That extends generally to flip and writes, although I've found, and this could just be a coincidence, that games that do use a flip and write mechanism generally I find more tolerable than pure roll and writes. For whatever reason, the card maybe adds a little bit more puzzle to it that I prefer. But, either way, I find them to be largely solitary affairs and not especially engaging. I played through Welcome to the Moon in its entirety in the campaign form with another person, just two of us playing through it. We played through the whole thing over a course of sessions. And if you've played Welcome to, or as Barry informed me earlier, Welcome to My Perfect Neighborhood?
Your perfect home.
Welcome to Your Perfect Home is the full title. But if you played Welcome to, then the core principles of, flip the cards, each player picks one offering, you can pick the same offering or a different offering, and then you cross off these neighborhoods on your board, which will be scored as they're crossed off. But of course, they escalate numerically, and there's a challenge around filling in the numbers in such a way that you can do them all, right? It takes that core principle, and over the course of 8 different maps, changes it around. And then it's got the suits, which are water and electricity and plants. And the concept, is that actually over the course of the campaign, we're leaving Earth, we're going to survive in space for a while, and then maybe something else is going to happen. And I won't spoil that campaign, even though, it's not exactly a narrative-driven thing. It's really more about the puzzle. There is an ongoing sort of narrative development to the scenarios. And those suits are going to take on quite different, nuanced functions over the different scenarios. But I really, really enjoyed it. I really liked Welcome to the Moon. I had a really nice time playing it. It's sort of short enough that it doesn't outstay its welcome. I do think for us, me and the person I was playing this with, we are quite deep in the hobby, so Welcome to the Moon offered these new rules and slight nuances to every game that we welcomed and we found appealing. I think if you were looking for just like sort of a quick thing to pull out, those differences might be a little frustrating because you just have to learn a marginally different rule set and then get your head around the changes. And so, I can see why that might be a little tiresome. Also, the rulebook's not the best in the world about communicating those changes. So we did have to do a little bit of educated guessing on how some of them worked, and ended up on BGG a few times just to see if we're doing it correctly. And there was at least one scenario that I recall where we got to sort of the end of it, and I had to explain again how the scoring worked for this scenario because one of us hadn't understood it. And was disappointed to discover they'd been doing it wrong. Which, it is a case of and that's not a satisfying experience for anyone really. But, that's just the rule book could have been a little bit better, I think, about holding people's hands into the subtle rules changes across the scenarios. But overall, really, really good. I particularly liked the final scenario. That did something that I really, really enjoyed. And I have not seen in any of the other Welcome to stuff.
Yes, the normal. So Welcome to Your Perfect Home, Welcome to Las Vegas are all pretty samey. Still fun.
Tragically, I don't think you'll get to see this cool thing that I liked about the final scenario in the solo mode.
I don't
think they'll be able to manifest it. It's just not going to be the same.
The same. Fair enough. But the rules, the nuances of the rules if you go back and read the rules after you know how to play, they make perfect sense. If you try to learn from the rules, it's a little tricky as to what they're trying to say. Board Game Arena, of course, will keep you right, so you can't make any big mistakes in that sense.
Yeah.
And I'll plug myself. I did film myself playing the 3 over on Board Games with Barry. If you want to watch it, because I actually think the second mission's the one where I first had the hurdle of trying to figure out what it meant and didn't get it until the end. But it's very straightforward once you know. It's just tricky to understand where cutting off parts of your supply chain will impact where you can put your plants. And it's not obvious from the rules, but it is obvious when you play.
Yeah.
But no, had a good time with that. I do hope they manage to find the funds to do the other missions at least, if not implement the full campaign. I understand they may want people to buy the game, and I can recommend the game to have on your shelves as well.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend Welcome to the Moon if these sorts of puzzles are something you enjoy. This feels like easy to recommend because it's not my sort of thing and I enjoyed it, which means that it's either weird in a way that I like, but in this case, actually, I think just high quality enough to bring me into it.
Yeah.
And it's also just not that expensive.
No, and the campaign also adds enough variability to the boards. Like if you just got it and played it as a normal board game, no campaign, you'd have a lot of fun there.
Yeah.
Once you play through the campaign, you unlock a few things, which you can then incorporate into variation. So there's a lot of variety in the box as well.
I think the campaign does a really good job of rolling out sort of the different scenarios in a digestible and sensible way. So I would recommend doing the campaign. It also doesn't take very long.
No, it's always 8 missions, right?
Yeah, 8 missions. Sessions are 30 to 40 minutes tops, like maybe even quicker.
Because I hate campaign games.
Barry will commit to campaign games unless BGA is keeping him right.
Yeah. Legacy games, maybe. No, been playing that. Had a lot of fun. Definitely going to be playing the other missions in real life, if not on Board Game Arena.
Very good, very nice.
Very good, very nice. And then more card games. There are cards in Welcome To, that's why I like it. But a game you spoke about previously, I finally had a chance to play, and that is Compile, which is another head-to-head. It's a complete game in a box. There's a drafting element, but mostly it's playing cards to a location where your card does something funky. Whether that's interacting with your side of the board, your opponent's side of the board, where they can place cards, what cards they can place, turning off powers, turning on powers, some mind games at times, a little bit of bluffing, and it's just really good. I think it's a straight upgrade to Lancier.
Yep.
And I still quite like Lancier, but I would Compile over that at any point.
I think Compile is a little bit more complex, and it's got a little bit more on offer for people who are more into their card games.
Yeah.
Lancier is a marginally smaller box, like a fractionally smaller, but I do think I could teach that to people who are less into the hobby. Mm-hmm. But I do think also that we get more mileage out of Compile. I just think that there's more game there for the long term.
And much more surprising combos, I would say, or card interactions at least. There's not maybe chains of combos necessarily, but the interactions between the cards are really clever and sometimes do very unexpected things, even though they're doing things that are relatively straightforward. But the way you can use them and the way you can see those in your hand before you play them, very clever. And so that is Compile by designed by Michael Yang and art by, well, actually, I want to speak a little bit on the art. So Nolan Nasser and Alan Panikal, and it is from Greater Than Games. The art does a very clever thing where they've digitized art, so it all looks very glitch-based art, I would say. is
Yeah, there's not really any visuals in the terms of discernible imagery. It's all patterns, and I guess it's trying to evoke this idea of being the mind of an AI.
Yeah, I thought it was quite clever, because initially it just looks like a whole bunch of computer noise, and then you look at it a bit more and you're like, I see what you did there.
There's something there. And I guess it's where, I mean, there is also a piece of art on each of the protocol images. And, you know, as you were saying, the art is also, it's got these glitch effects, computer noise, or whatever you might want to call it. It's sort of artistic variations to represent these different things, protocols like light and dark and hate and plague. And that in itself is art, you know.
Yes.
Just because it's abstract doesn't mean it's not artistic.
All very clever. But I had a good time with that. Looking forward to playing more and looking forward to seeing what's in the box. I've not had a lot of time with it yet, but then the second main 2 and Ox 2 when they come out.
Yep. Likewise, I would like to play more Compile and explore more of it, and then also excited for main 2 as well.
Nice.
Yeah, it's sort of for me. It fits into the same sort of mold as Mind Bug and things like that. It sort of feels like it scratches the itch of a competitive lifestyle card game, but with the accessibility of something where we don't have to live the lifestyle.
Yeah. Though I say accessibility, schmaccessibility, get me more in on those LCGs. And I've been playing Hubworld Aidalon. So this is the newest game from the guys at Earthborn Games. So they do Earthborn Rangers, and so that is designed by Michael Boggs and Corey DeVore. The artists on this one are probably going to expand as they make more cards, but for these starter sets, it's Joe Banner, the second, Corey DeVore, and Evan Simonet. And this is a head-to-head competitive card game. Who'da thunk? Coming from me. Where at the moment, you might be out of luck at the moment actually, but for a time they were giving away the starter decks or taster decks, shall I say, for the price of postage. So this is a game that will be coming to GameFound or crowdfunding in the future. But they were giving away some decks so people could get their hands on it, to play it, see if they like it, and find out a little more, get some feedback from the game. So the core of the game is similar enough to Netrunner that you could call it a spiritual successor. The game has 3 locations. You have your archives, which was something you had in Netrunner. You have your hand, which is called the Council, and you have your commons, which is your deck. So R&D, HQ, archives. But rather than be an asymmetric game, this game is symmetric in as much as you are both the runner and the corporation, as you would be in Netrunner, where you have to attack and defend all from the same deck.
Right, so you're doing both at the same time.
Yeah, so you've only got the 3 servers, 3 locations, and you have to be able to get into the other person's side while protecting your side on the same thing.
So you're trying to, so in just like in Netrunner, you're trying to score agendas, but you can only get them from your opponent's deck.
Correct. So it's agents in this game where you have to go in and steal them. And there's a lot of things baked into the game that isn't in Netrunner. But the core, if you've played Netrunner, you'll be quite familiar with the loop of the game. The other big difference from Netrunner is rather than you have all your goes and I have my go, it's shot about. I have a go, you have a go, I have a go, you have a go.
So in Netrunner terms, this would be like you click, I click, you click, I click.
Yes. So rather than you take all your clicks, then I'll take all my clicks, and you take all your clicks. So there's a little more back and forth. And the main part of the game is, and the reason I say it's most like Netrunner is not because of all these steps, but also because it's an economy game. Which is what Netrunner was, right? It's a game about economics. If you have the most money, you can do whatever you want in Netrunner, right? You could have, 15 cost ice res that the runner can never get through, or you could just spend all your money on breaking the corporation's ice. And so the game has the same thing. You can click, you'll make a run on somebody's server, whether that's their hand, their commons, their archives, and you're going to access cards. Now, the game also builds up quite quickly, because using your money, you can apply heat to the other person. and that determines how many cards you access on any given run. So whereas in Netrunner or other games of the ilk, you would spend a card as an event to access multiple cards, in this game you will be able to place a permanent resource on your opponent that will let you access more cards. So the games are quick. Right? The games are going to go past a lot quicker. If you're able to access commons for 4 or 5 cards at a time, you will find an agent eventually, and you're going to be stopping your opponent drawing. It's possible to get unlock. So then the question's asked for you: can you protect that area more efficiently than they can get in? You're also limited to only being 3 deep on ice, so you can never build up a server that's completely impenetrable by having 40 cards all in just one location. And you also can't score your own points. You have to access your opponent to get it. So the game's pretty good. I mean, the taster decks suffer a little from being all 4 main factions in one deck. And both decks are the same. You could do a little bit of deck building, I guess, with the 2 starters that you get given. But they're probably not... You wouldn't necessarily want more of the same cards because they serve a different function. So if you took all the orange cards, sure, you've got some good ice, but you don't have any good attacks or good events, kind of thing. So it suffers a little from that, and it also suffers a little from doing both, right? So where I'm saying it's merged the runner and the corp side from Netrunner, you no longer have that focus for what you're trying to do. You're not trying to keep the runner out while you score agendas, and you're not trying to get in at all costs without thinking of protection. So I would like to see constructed decks to understand what a big boy game of it's like, rather than this, which would be more a sort of sparring taster. It is a taster deck for what it is. And that was Hubworld Aidalon. I'm not sure when it's coming out. They're still developing cards. They're still working on locking down both the style, the art, the layout and stuff. Everything looks very good as is, but is not yet complete.
And the intention then, so this is the intention, this is going to be deck construction, so build your decks ahead of time. It is coming from Earthborn Games.
It's coming from Earthborn Games.
So the actual company that released Earthborn Rangers, and the idea then is they're going to kickstart it and then ongoing releases?
So it'll be twice yearly releases. I think they've announced, much like second season of Earthborn Rangers, these living card games models, but I guess it's more sustainable on crowdfunding because you know how many people are going to want to buy your game.
Yeah, I mean, Earthborn Rangers, I have no idea if they are planning more of it, but also it couldn't be more different. Like it's an ongoing adventure campaign game.
Yes.
And this is a head-to-head dueling game. So I would imagine more regular releases, and they won't be doing them 2 Kickstarters a year.
I think they are.
Is that their plan?
I'm not 100% sure. I'm not privy to their business arrangements. But I think, two Kickstarters a year to fund it. Or it might get to a point where it's popular enough that they just go for pure manufacturing and distribution. But
well, as we discussed earlier, this model could be done that way, especially if they're relatively small card releases. But I mean, if they choose to go via crowdfunding for the whole thing, I mean, they could also do that. It's in a position where the crowdfunding's in a position where that's not possible either. But is the intention then to sort of embed a sort of lifestyle type game with a competitive scene?
I don't know what their plans are. I would have thought so. I mean, Michael Boggs, worked on various FFG card games before, and not that FFG are particularly good at maintaining their competitive card games, to be fair, but I don't think that was Boggs' fault.
Right, but FFG have always been quite dedicated to the idea of sort of an ongoing competitive scene to support their lifestyle games. It just...
And organised play, and of course, like even as a first step, making these taster decks available for people is a step beyond the involvement that FFG might have had in the past for a community. They look like they're trying to build the community.
100%
to behind it. So
well, and if your product is as sort of cheap to manufacture as card games are, then it makes sense that they would want to get it out there and get people, their target market like you playing it and talking about it.
Yeah. Had a good time with it. I want to see what a full competitive deck looks like to understand the nuances about how to go about deck building, and how a game plays out at a higher level. At the level it's at, it's okay.
When I think about when we picked up the original Null Signal Netrunner decks, my buddy and I, who hadn't played Netrunner for years and years and years and years, never got into it in a major competitive way. We were like playing it again. We're like, oh yeah, this is good. If we had the actual cards, this would be great.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of card games, I also have been playing a card game again. It's more Molly House.
Molly Molly. Never played it.
It is very clearly based around a deck of cards and then a board game applied. But yeah, I talked about Molly House already. This is the sort of semi-cooperative game in which you are playing as the...
Oh my god, Mike, who cares? There's a comment on that from I better explain that joke. People say I looked bored last time Mike explained it, but I had to look up what he was talking about.
Oh, is that the joke?
Yeah.
People said that you looked bored when I was explaining
Molly House. I wasn't bored, I just didn't know what he was on about, so I had to look it up.
So I talked about Molly House, which is a 2025 release, designed by Joe Kelly, co-whirler, with art by Rachel Ford and published by Whirligig Games. It is the Gregorian era.
Gregorian.
And of course, sexual promiscuity is much more fastidiously managed and culturally frowned upon. So people have developed these Molly houses where they can go and be free, sexually promiscuous. But unfortunately, a lot of it is classed as sodomy and therefore legal. And so the Society for the Reformation of Manners is out to find the Mollies and out them to the authorities, where they will be tried and possibly hanged. And so you are playing as the Mollies, and you are trying to go to the different Molly houses and have the most joy in your life and be free. And of course, you can get discovered and you can be indicted. And if that is the case, then you may well have to turn informant to get out of your indictments and avoid punishment. What this manifests in the game is functionally it's a game of hand management and hand building. So you've got a hand of cards. The hand of cards offers numbers in different suits. And every so often there will be a festival. And players can decide when the festivals will happen. Your turn is very simply one action, and that action can be more cards in your hand or having a festival. And if you hold the festival, then we'll go around the table and in turn order we'll add cards to the festival. And the idea is to build a strong hand of cards that scores a lot of points. And you want to be involved in the festival because your contributions will score you points, which is joy. And you'll get that joy, and that's how you're going to win. But you may not have the cards to participate. You may also want to sabotage the festival because you're just trying to get more points over someone else who's scoring well in the festival. Ultimately, the best hand that is made will score, so that there's a hierarchy to hands, a bit like poker, where a full house beats a pair, and also, if you're running a straight, the higher straight beats the lower straight. So the higher numbers win. So you will at the end of the festival look and see what is the best hand that can possibly be made. All those cards will score, and everyone will get some amount of joy, including the community, which is like a non-player entity that everybody is trying to score points for. Because at the end of the game, if the community hits its threshold, then there is a good ending where the community survives and everybody will score points for their joy, and whoever has the most joy will be the winner. So therein is the game. You're trying to get the most joy if the community survives, so you can win under those conditions. However, there is the possibility to turn informant. And this is where you start to out your friends to the authorities. Thematically, that's what you're doing. You're informing on your friends to the authorities, and then they will get into trouble and you will be rewarded. But there are two sort of potential benefits to this. One is if you turn informant and you never ever get discovered, then even if there is a good ending, that is to say the community survives and thrives, provided you were successful as an informant, you can write off any indictments you received. So over the course of the game, players will be receiving these indictments for being, frivolous and enjoying themselves too much. And those indictments will be seen by the players when they receive them, but they're kept hidden, and at the end of the game will punish players. And the punishments can be more or less bad. It could be -4 points to your overall score. It could be you are hung and eliminated from the game and you can't win. So if you have successfully informed on the community, even if the community survives, you will still be seen by the authorities as an ally, and your indictments can be written off in their whole. So none of those punishments will apply to you. However, if the community does not survive and is in fact taken down by the authorities, only the players who successfully informed will be eligible for victory. Everyone else is hung and killed. And under those circumstances, there's going to be a scoring system where actually you're looking at how much reputation you've got with the molly houses. Effectively, if you are the least corrupt informant, you will win. So, whoever's had the least fun in the molly house community. Boo, indeed. And then there's the ending where neither of those two things happen. So the community didn't cross the threshold, but the requirements for the community to collapse were not met either, which is one of two things, actually. It's all the molly houses shut down, or one molly house shuts down really, really hard. If that doesn't happen either, then there is what's called the atrophy of the community. It didn't thrive, it didn't collapse, so it just atrophies. Everybody loses under those conditions. And so I played it once, and we played it at 4 players. It's a 2 to 5 player game, but the 2-player game I think has a fair few rules augmentations, which it must do, because it really is a sort of a semi-cooperative game, and it's based around this sort of idea fundamentally that you kind of, if you're working towards the happy ending and that's what you're banking on, you really want everybody to want that, because getting the community over the threshold is quite difficult. Mm-hmm. And so if there's a huge runaway leader, that's a problem for that runaway leader, because nobody's going to want to pursue that ending with them. So you kind of have to balance the books a bit, and that could be by making sure nobody's a runaway leader. It could also be by saying, well, look, like I might be a runaway leader, but I've got 3 indictments. So I'm probably going to take all these penalties. And, as that negotiation goes on, you don't know how bad those indictments are. Like they're quite variable. There's quite a lot of variance to those. And even at the end of the game, they're all 2 outcomes, and you throw a die to see which outcome you get. So it could be -4 points. It could be -10 if you roll poorly. So you don't even know what that's going to look like. But in the first game we played, of course, I talked about it on the show. There were 4 players. None of us went down the route of turning informant. I think, we're all a bit sort of uncertain about it. And the game, it doesn't have a lot of rules overhead, but what it does have is quite complex and nuanced and relatively unintuitive. So it's helpful to, you just kind of have to play the game to get all its nuances, and understand the sort of heuristics of how do I win this, what's good, what's the value of these cards, even the understanding that you can't score any hand on your own. You will, if you want to score any of the hands during a festival, you will either have to rely on the random flop added by the community, which is totally unreliable and unpredictable, or more likely you'll have to negotiate with other people at the table, like saying, I would really like to do a special dance in the House of Suits. In the Suit of Fans. I would really like to do a special dance in the Suit of Fans. Does anyone have any fan cards? What numbers have you got? This kind of negotiation will have to take place to build those hands, because otherwise it's just not going to happen. And sort of understanding all of that, quite complex. Our first game, we all just worked together to get the community over the line, and then the player with the most points won. And that was reasonably satisfying, reasonably exciting, flipping over all the indictments on the end. Nobody had turned informant, therefore nobody could write off the indictments, rolling to see those outcomes, all very satisfying and exciting. In the second game, also 4 players, it became sort of quite clear as we were going into the end game that, not clear, no, it was, I had, in fact, I had, right before the turn of the next player, I could run a festival, probably get the community over the line. But if I did, that festival was going to be so profitable for me because it was a festival at the house of fans, and I had so much reputation with fans that if the festival went off successfully, I would get like 10 points, and I had no indictments. So I had scored incredibly well, and I'd not really managed to distribute the points effectively, not for lack of trying. So I said, look, I can't possibly run this festival because I will just win, and so I think you'll all sabotage it because you can't let me run it. And they were relatively new to the game, the other players, and they're like, no, it's fine, you can just win. And I was like,
That's not the game.
that's not really the game. So what I'm going to do is, because I do feel like there was one other player at the table who I was like, they're not going to go for this. Even if the other two players are on board, I don't know if they're going to be able to get it over the line. And the other thing is, you can play threats into the hands. I won't talk all about that, but there are threats in the deck as well, rogues and constables who are trying to shut down the thing. And you need to have some shitty parties to invite the constables to convince them nothing's going on, right? And people can throw constables into good parties to sort of sabotage deliberately. And part of the nuance of the game is you don't know if they're doing that because they want you to suffer, or if they're doing that because they want the whole community to suffer. Like, are they still a good person and they're just trying to sabotage you and your party, or have they turned informant and they're trying to bring everything down? Suffice to say, I let the turn pass to the next player, and they had very good odds of throwing a festival, and then they just rolled horribly and couldn't do it. They effectively rolled like a double one or something, so they couldn't get to the Molly house to throw the festival.
Right.
So we couldn't throw the festival. We couldn't get the community over the line. Turns out that other player who I was worried about had turned informant, so they were trying to sabotage us, but they also were not able to sabotage the communities effectively, and so everything atrophied and we all lost, which was not super great. It was a little anticlimactic, honestly. It was kind of a bummer that we got this sort of bum roll, because I think it would have been really exciting to get the community over the line right at the end like that. And there wasn't really much we could do about that. It was my decision, and that moment of letting the festival go to the next player, I do think it was the right choice.
Yeah.
And I do think if I'd thrown that festival, it's possible the informer could have sabotaged us sufficiently that it actually enabled them to win the game. I also feel like if I don't know for sure about that. It really depended what cards they had in hand. But I think the other thing is that if the other players had just let me run that festival and score the way I wanted to, I would get all these points just by dint of putting it on the festival. I think that it would have effectively been handing me the game. It might have worked in that group, and they were saying at the end, like, oh, we wish you'd run the festival. We didn't want the cops to win, and we didn't want everyone to lose. Damn it, why didn't you just run the festival? And I'm like, yeah, but if I was playing with players who were really across the game, they would never have done that. That would never have worked, and I get, and so, part of me is like, well, it's cool that emotionally they were on the side of the community. And that's something the game does really, really, really well, is like through the theming and the naming of the sort of concepts in the game, like the raiding of the Molly house, like the hands in the game are called a dance, a christening, and a special festival or something like that. So you're like, okay, are we going to try for a christening? Does anyone have a queen? We need a queen for the christening. It sounds like you're talking about real events, that actually happened. So the way they've married that theme into the naming of things, it really gets you in sort of a mood of role playing. And you do really feel like, as you're trying to get the constables out of the deck and, throw a shitty party, a quiet gathering for the constables to get them all convinced nothing's going on. It really gets you into a sort of a sense of theme and role play. That I think is quite intoxicating. It's really good. My concern was then we went on to play another 3-player game. In this game, I was really far off winning going into the 5th week. The game ends at the end. It's 5 weeks, which is rounds. but it will also end at the end of the week in which one of the victory conditions was triggered. So it may not be all 5 weeks. All of my games have gone all 5 weeks. So I've not yet seen it be shorter than that. But in this 3-player game, the third game I played in the 3-player game, players had just denied me points frivolously, I think, because they thought it'd be funny, but I'd been completely locked out of Community Survives Victory. And so I had no real choice. And part of it was also my own fault. Actually, in week 4, I just had a complete brain fart, and I just sort of, because it's hand management as well, I just picked up a bunch of cards that meant I couldn't really play them because I forgot that because I was like, I can build this hand if I get all these cards. And I spent half of the week collecting all the cards, and then I was like, no, I can't play them all. I need someone else to play the other half. I only get to play 2 cards, and I'd collected all 4 that I need. So I'm like, now the 2 cards I need, I have in my head, and I'm screwed. I can't play any of them. So I'd sort of accidentally sabotaged myself, which, again, it's totally fine, because actually, if the other players had worked with me, we could have found ways to score the cards I had and got me back into the game. But actually, even when one of them had a festival and I was in line to score, they pushed me out of the scoring for that festival just because they thought it'd be funny. And it, I guess it was kind of funny, but also it meant that I just wasn't on side going into week 5.
Yep.
I had a handful of really useful cards for the community and everyone, but no incentive to play them because I couldn't score them without anyone else's help. And that meant that I would be giving points to the players who were beating me in a way that was that was just going to lock me out of winning further. So no incentive. So I turned informant, and I successfully sabotaged the house I was informing on. I actually managed to tank the game in week 5 in like record time because going into week 5 I had a hand full of cards, so I could just I could just mill the deck so quickly, get through week 5, and then going into the end game, the final sort of end of week roundup, the community was like this close to collapsing, but just by sheer bad luck, the way it works is that you've got all these cards that are lined up to sabotage the community, but you ditch a third of them. So you don't quite know what's going to go wrong. And I needed 2 very specific things to go wrong. And 2 of the cards, I needed 1 of 2 cards to be in the final 2/3, and they both got axed.
Right.
So unfortunately, even though probability was very much in my favor, just due to the cards that were taken out of that deck at the end, it meant that the community didn't collapse. So I didn't win, even though I think I was very close to it. And so the community atrophied again.
Right, yeah.
And it just felt a bit anticlimactic
Yeah,
again.
well, back to back.
Yeah, so I think, I think that there's a lot of really interesting player interaction here, and I think that the theme and the presentation and the production and everything is great. I think that the first game is always going to be exciting because nobody really knows what's going to happen, and it presents a really interesting prospect, and you're going to get really sort of intrigued by that. My concern is that either it's too easy for somebody to sabotage going into the 5th week, because it is very difficult for the community to survive, and we only managed to do it in the first game because nobody turned traitor. So my concern is that it's too precarious going into the 5th week, and if anyone decides to betray the community, then it will always just end up either with them winning or atrophying. But my other concern really is just that it requires such a subtle understanding of balancing the game state around keeping people invested in the community, not letting them lose too hard, balancing their score around the indictments so that, you're not going, if you are a runaway leader, you can effectively convince people that they're still in with a chance because of your potential penalties at the end. Just finding a group that has all of that nuanced understanding to play the game will be quite challenging. Because really it wants, I think, 4 or 5 players. The 3-player game is fine. I think the 2-player game and the solo mode could be fine too. I don't know. But to get the full sort of experience of the sort of psychological elements of the game, I think you really want like sort of 4 players. I haven't played with 5. Maybe 5 would be great. Even better. I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, the thing I mentioned, the other Burley game, or John Company second edition, where it is also sort of semi-co-op to a large degree, whether or not the company's going to survive or fail. But you're right enough. It never felt like a single player could force the tanking of the company, but it did rely on the company going badly, people being too greedy, and then somebody coming in to put the nails in the coffin if that was what they wanted to do. Whereas if things were progressing in a satisfactory manner until you decided to turn, how do you combat? How do you balance that? How do you combat that so that the other players still have a chance? But the informant also has a chance. It's a very fine line. Because if there's no point in even turning informant, then why do it? So there has to be the option. So it makes sense to me that you could be powerful enough to do it if you're that far behind. But also didn't sound particularly satisfying the way it shook out.
Yeah, the second two games were very enjoyable during the game, and then sort of reflecting on the outcome in the end was a bit disappointing. The third game was, I think, again, enjoyable during, and for me, very exciting in week 5 because I'd turned informant and I was thinking, I've got this. I'm gonna do it. Yeah, this is gonna be great. And it was a little I think the only way to have a better shot of being succeeding as the informant would have been for me to commit to it earlier.
Yeah.
But I don't think that I could have well, quite frankly, actually, unless you are you can only turn informant under certain circumstances, and the opportunity just hadn't come up. And I don't think I could have engineered it unless the only way for me to engineer it I would have probably already been quite successful in the game. Like, you have to get a bunch of cards down in your scoring area, and then the Molly House associated with those cards is rated. So I would have had to have scored a whole bunch of cards. And if I'd done that, I probably wouldn't be in a position where I wanted to turn informant. So there's sort of that interesting kind of dilemma there. And I don't know if the idea is that you get an indictment card and then you're so scared you decide to turn informant. But I don't think the individual indictments are necessarily going to be enough. I think a score gap is going to be a much bigger incentive for people to turn informant. But, in closing as well, just on the point of John Company, both games are very conscientious of the sort of psychological interactions of the players at the table. John Company much more so because it is a huge, big, long negotiation game that wants 5 or 6 players. This is much, much shorter. Like, Molly House is 90 minutes. Okay. It's not nearly as big or complex as John Company. And also, I think, the Molly House is not, or the concept of the Molly Houses and them collapsing is not really a parallel for the company, just because obviously the company's so big and has so many moving parts. And the Molly Houses are very, very simple by comparison. Fair. But, both games that are very, very interactive and very much focused on the players at the table and their positions on the board and the sort of psychology around that.
I mean, only semi-co-op is one of my least favourite mechanisms at times, particularly playing with couples.
Well, I do think that, on that topic, 2 things really. One, I would say, like, semi-cooperative. There's a fine line, I think, between like sort of semi-cooperative and interactive. Like Eclipse, not something I'd describe as a semi-cooperative game, but if somebody doesn't stop the descendants of Draco from running away with it at the start, that faction always gets a strong early lead, and somebody needs to do something about it, and they might need to negotiate with another player at the table, team up to stop that person, right? So there are, and again, like going into the final rounds of Eclipse, if there's an obvious leader who has a very strong fleet and lots of territory, people need to team up against that player. So there's these sort of emergent alliances, which could be described as semi-cooperative, because there's still only one winner, but people need to work together to stop, a leader. Whereas Molly House has a very formal semi-cooperative structure, in that there is a world in which everybody's working towards the same ending and the same goal and striving to achieve an objective that is universal, but there will still only be one winner.
Yeah.
And it is possible to then take steps to fall outside that dynamic. John Company, a bit different again, because really the company is an opportunity for people to sort of leverage as many points as possible, but their investment only goes so far as extracting personal wealth from the company, usually at the expense of the company's well-being. But semi-cooperative, another good example would be Nemesis, right? Like Nemesis, again, everyone's got the same sort of goal, which is make sure the spaceship's going to Earth, make sure that you survive, make sure that the engines aren't going to explode, But then everyone's got their own private objectives, which sometimes contradict the universal objective, and sometimes just, it's kill another person, which means you could be on the team as long as one person on the team dies. You're not really against the group, you're just against one of. Anyway, the point is semi-cooperative, it can work really well. It can be done really well. But also I think it's an extremely difficult thing to balance.
Yep.
One of the reasons Nemesis gets away with what it does is because it's like beer, pretzels, and popcorn game. It's not deep strategy. It's a huge roller coaster. There's so much luck in that game. You can't really, if you're frustrated by bad luck, you're just never going to enjoy Nemesis.
No, well, I played it once. That was enough.
And there you go. So that's sort of what that, So semi-cooperative, very difficult to do well. But I think, for what it's worth, like, I think Molly House does it well and presents a really interesting gaming experience. My concern is that it will end up atrophying too often, and that for it to not atrophy, I'll need a group of people who've played it a lot. I think your very first games will probably avoid that. And then I think there might be a swathe of games in the middle where like someone's inexperienced or a couple of players are inexperienced and you just can't get away from this atrophying ending because, they just don't really get the nuances of the game. But then maybe you emerge at the end with this sort of really satisfying, deep experience. I don't know, because I haven't got there yet.
Well, yeah, the problem is Omni gamers as well. How often do you get the chance to play with the same people, the same games repeatedly?
Yeah, and that's true, and that's a real problem. Yep.
Smooth transitions.
Here's my segue. I refer to Barry. He's in charge of the agenda for this meeting.
Yes, next on the minutes here, next on the meeting. So a little unusual, not unusual, it's a newish game, and that is Great Western Trail, El Paso. So this is the new version, which is a lighter version of the Great Western Trail series. So this is by Alexander Pfister, and in this instance, Johannes Krenner. Artist is Chris Williams, who did the art for the second edition of Great Western Trail, not the first edition, with the weird faces.
So we're talking about the second edition of the core game, but maybe not Argentina or New Zealand? Or maybe all of them?
I think he's now the artist for
all four of the
right. So all current
ones.
versions, yes. That's published by Lookout Games. And Great Western Trail El Paso is a version of Great Western Trail that just plays a little quicker, right?
Right. So they've done Argentina, which is like Great Western Trail ++. They did New Zealand. Did you play it?
I've not played New Zealand.
So nor have I, but I understand it's some additional mechanisms again, but maybe not as complex as Argentina. I'm not sure. I actually had a chance to play it. People like it better than Argentina.
Okay.
Argentina was, I would describe in the Great Western Trail world, as a little bit of a flop.
Okay, fair. Great Western Trail's already got enough going on, I feel. Like adding more. I didn't feel like it was missing anything that needed to have more, but this is the opposite. It's a very small board. You don't have a lot of the things to think about that you have in Great Western Trail. There's no, when you get to the end of the line, you're not adding little guys to be able to buy new characters, the cowboys, the engineers, the builders.
So that whole system of sort of hiring staff is out?
No, but now staff are permanent. You can hire whoever you want whenever you're on an appropriate space to do so. Okay. It's not an end game timer, and it is not a decision point for what you're trying to do every time you get to the end. It does still have a lot of the so it still has the cows, right? So the card playing cow element of selling at the end of the trail to make your points. But now you get I want to say a Simmental cow, an orange cow, 2-pointer. No, 0-pointer, I think. 2-value 0-pointer cow to stop people just running around the board. So
when you get to the end, your herd actually gets bloated.
Yes, with a
crappy
cow. Yeah.
I don't know what thematically that represents.
I don't know what thematically is, but the board itself is very reminiscent of the bigger board, but it's just much smaller. There's you can only place 2 buildings each per player now, and there's only enough spots really for those 2 buildings on the boards. It's much.
So are all the spots open to all players, and it's kind of like first come first served? Or
Initially,
do you have a set initially? Yes.
Yeah.
So if you are slow placing the buildings, you'll just have whatever's left.
Correct. Yeah. There's no hazards, so you're not paying fees for going certain routes. Just if you land on an opponent's building, you only get your basic actions on your player board rather than the effect of the building. So you can, if you're quick with getting the buildings down, you can put it in a place where your opponents might just have to take a worse turn.
Correct me if I'm wrong. In normal Great Western Trail, when you land on an opponent's building, you do get to utilize the building, but you have to pay them?
No, I think you still just get a
bomb action?
A single cog action on your board.
Okay.
I don't think you can use other players' buildings in either game.
Okay, fair enough. I couldn't remember. It's been a while.
Yeah, I played the Great Western Trail again recently. And you're going through, there's no trains in this one in terms of moving the train along to see how far you can deliver.
That's going to put a lot of people off.
Yeah, because trains are great.
People love trains.
There is still a picture for train on one of the tiles for the engineer, and there's a new element which you spend your engineers on, which are carriages of trains. Each one gives you a bonus depending on how many engineers you have.
So there are still train elements.
There are still train elements. They're just not a personal
bring the people back in.
Train meeple for you to move further and further along as you go. So were you for somehow able to deliver 20 points worth of kills on that first turn, you can immediately do it. Mm-hmm. You won't be able to, but I'm just saying you could. And the game will end when that last rubbish cow gets taken. The next person to deliver ends the game. Is how that one works. But everything else is still there. The bonuses, the achievements, the delivering cows and building up your hand. You can still only deliver one kind of each cow, so you want to get the different kinds. You still have the workers, which determine what kind of cows you can buy or how many cows you can buy and for what price. But it's just quicker. You get everything that Great Western Trail has, and I would say all the best bits of Great Western Trail in a much shorter and tighter package. So we had playing just 2-player. We had a really good time playing El Paso. We played it. It's like, oh yeah, I remember now. I remember why I like Great Western Trail, or going back to it. So then we decided to play Great Western Trail whilst El Paso was fresh.
The OG or the second edition?
OG. I don't know what changes the second edition actually introduced.
Only 2 that I can think of. One is that so OG has, of course, the rails to the north. Second edition also has rails to the north. That's but people play the second edition with rails to the north less because it's effectively a newer release.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So the rails to the north, I think, for the second edition came out roughly the same time as Argentina, and people bought that instead.
Okay, yeah.
So fewer people have the expansion for the second edition, but actually the big change is the Native Americans are gone.
Yeah, I mean, yes, the but that doesn't functionally.
No, they've just become something
Outlaws.
Outlaws, yeah.
Yeah, right. So, functionally same game. So anyway, we went back to it. Now, the very first time I played Great Western Trail, I didn't like it. But that is a function of being taught by one of my 2 friends who can't teach games. And then when I went back and played it again, I was like, okay, this is actually quite good. And so immediately, like a couple of days after playing El Paso, we went back to Great Western Trail. 2-player again, so it's not perhaps the best player count, but we're just like, I hate this. Why we're not playing El Paso? It's so much better. And I couldn't specifically point you to the functions of Great Western Trail that made us dislike it compared to El Paso, because everything's pretty much in El Paso that's in Great Western Trail.
Did you play Rails to the North?
No.
No. Okay.
So just core base game, and we went through, and it was just a lot of clunkiness has been removed, and so the whole way you buy cows in Great Western Trail depends on how many cowboys you've got. If you've got a certain number of cowboys, you can buy a certain level of cow, assuming it's in the market for a certain price.
Yeah.
Now, the market and cows still exist in El Paso. It just works a little better. You don't need the 5 cowboys to get the 5 coster into your deck. If you've got the money for it, it's all much more money driven. I mean, the Great Western Trail is hugely money driven anyway. The benefits you get, the bonuses you get, are just make the game function a little better at times. I feel like I think the Great Western Trail, you can get what's the one that lets you draw a card, discard a card? It's not a certificate. That's what you do for selling. It is I don't know. The one bonus you got really was you can get little tokens that will let you cycle through your deck to get to what you want. This game has the bonuses that are a little easier to come by at times, assuming you've got the engineers. To work towards, you've got your... it's the same game. It's really hard to explain what's different. It just plays in like 45 minutes at 2. Like it's so much quicker, and you get almost all of the same feel, and I wouldn't go back to Great Western Trail if El Paso was on offer. The difference was we decided that we're going to... the guy that owns Great Western Trail was like, I'm getting rid of this and I'm going to get El Paso. And so...
Wild.
However, I'm looking at Board Game Geek just now, and it's not rated as well. 6.9 compared to Great Western Trail's whatever it's on.
Well, it's... I imagine it's done very well.
I think it's a lot of people hating it. Although I see somebody's found some broken strats.
In El Paso?
Well, I'm just looking at the 1-star reviews for El Paso to understand why it's down.
Well, if it's not out yet, how did you play it? Is it on BGA?
It's on BGA.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's out very soon if it's not out.
There's a lot of pre-orders up at the time of recording this.
Yeah.
Is the speed of the game thanks to it streamlining this, or thanks to BGA? Were you able to
No, because we played both games on BGA.
Right. Okay.
Right?
So
so
okay. So you
it's
can
apples
make
to apples. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just, I don't know, the Great Western Trail felt like more of a slog.
I mean, Great Western Trail is one of those games that's very, very good, and I'm happy to play it, and I really like playing it. But whenever I get it out, I'm always like, it's surprisingly dense for a game that is mostly moving across a path and managing a hand of cards.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of like sort of little bit, and to be fair, it's what I expect from an Alexander Pfister game.
Mm-hmm.
Like his games are quite mechanical, and those mechanics are maybe not necessarily always seamlessly integrated, but instead present complex systems that need to be managed and understood correctly.
Yeah.
Now if you're the kind of person who doesn't mind complex systems and doesn't mind managing complex systems because you play a lot of games or the kinds of games you enjoy, you have that sort of thing, that's fine. It's not going to be a problem. But I think that Great Western Trail, the sort of hand management, the managing the criteria to produce a good hand and then being able to deliver it and score the points, I think that's compelling enough that it does well despite those systems rather than because of them. You know, those systems are put up with. And I think that the people who actually like that sort of thing, and I'm not saying that there aren't, those people don't exist, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't like that sort of thing. I'm just saying I think it's not a popular thing. I think it's, the people who like it are probably a minority, and it generally, I think, would detract from the popularity of the game, except that this game is compelling enough to have overcome them. And we've seen it before in Pfister games. Like good examples include Blackout Hong Kong, right? Which was a really cool game where you're in Hong Kong trying to restore power to the city during a blackout. It's an Alexander Pfister. The art was the design, overall graphic presentation of the game was quite difficult to deal with, but that wasn't the problem really. It's just a lot. You know, he presents complex games with lots of mechanisms, and I think unless they have a real sort of hook somewhere in them, it's quite a niche audience for those games.
Yeah. So Boon Lake's the other one I played more of his. And
Played Boon Lake, yeah.
The theme, they try to tell you there's a theme. There's not really.
Yeah, the theme is explore the uninhabited land while you race down a river. Maracaibo's another one, and I think Boon Lake, again, didn't do as well.
Yeah.
Maracaibo, very, very popular. Maracaibo, I think because the race around the Mediterranean, not the Mediterranean, the race around the...
Never played it. Caribbean?
Yes, thank you. The race around the Caribbean and the building of the tableau are two things that sort of have that emotional hook. You know, like it's a system that, you know, that you can optimize and works really well, provided people will just slow down and let you optimize your actions. But if you've got a player that wants to race around the table, then you better reevaluate what you're doing. And that's exciting, you know, like even if two players are all about optimizing their tableau and just like going along at a snail's pace, you know, it is about them both being that kind of player and the fact that they could just jump ahead at the right moment if they wanted to.
Yeah.
You know, so it's again, it's got that sort of that hook, right? Which I think Blackout and Boon Lake lacked. Even though Boon Lake did have the race element, it was a lot shorter and you could make, I think, less significant strides as well.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I can't say specifically why El Paso hit so hard compared to Great Western Trail. It takes out a couple of the more fiddly elements of Great Western Trail, but not, to my mind, to any detriment of the decisions and the core part of what you're saying you're doing. You're moving to a spot, you're taking an action, and you're trying to optimize your hand of cards by the time you get to the end of the trail. Well,
we will have to get our hands on a copy, play it physically, and I'll let you know if you're right.
All right, very kind. Very, very kind. Another game I picked up, 2-player only, and that is Beer and Bread. So
I've heard of this.
This is from a 2022 release. It was quite popular. I bought a number of 2-player games over the last sort of 3 years, but this one's escaped me for a time. I heard it was quite good. It's designed by Scott Alms, who's done
the Tiny Epic Games series and Heroes of Land, Air and Sea.
Yep.
And also the space game that people like, solo only.
Warp Drive.
Yes, Warp Drive.
Rift Warp.
No, I'm sure it's Warp Drive. Warp's Edge. It's called Warp's Edge.
I've got it. Can't remember.
How is it? Do you like it?
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. Bag Builder. Yeah, good. Artist in this one, Michael Menzel, and published by Deep Print Games and Pegasus Spiel. And this is a 2-player only game, very Agricola-looking, farming-based. You are making, would you believe, beer and bread.
Holy cow.
So the function of this game is, or the main part of the game is there's multi-purpose cards, multi-use cards, where you can use them as the beer or bread that's on them. You can use them as an upgrade to your farm, or you can use them for their resources generated from the board, assuming those resources are available. The key decision points are you can only store so many resources in your barn, and any you go over, you must give to your opponent. And because it's a 2-player only game, that's a direct gain for them, for a loss for you. However, if they've also got their storage full, they get nothing. It goes to waste. So, and then the final part, or the trick of the game, is it's what I would say Konieczka scoring. You'll only score the lowest of your beer or your bread. Right. So whatever, you can't just make beer, even though you might want to.
It's not called beer or bread.
Yeah, it's beer and bread. So you're going to score the lowest of the two. And the game takes place over 6 rounds. Some rounds are bountiful, some rounds are dry harvest seasons, where there's fewer resources come out. each of those seasons, you'll alternate either drafting from the cards that you're given, or you get what you're given. So the first round where it's bountiful, you're going to draft what you get. Second round, your hand of cards is your hand of cards. And on your turn, it goes shot about. You pick a card, what you're going to use it for, the resources, the creating, or the upgrades. But to start with, you can only build a single or create a single beer or bread before you have to clear everything out and start again. So later on you can build upgrades that will give you can build 2 beers before you have to sweep it out, but you won't score them until you can't make another one until you clear it. So there's a whole bunch of things that are all interlocked at what point you do what you're building up towards, what gets you the most points. Those upgrades give you benefits when you take another action. So when you harvest a wheat, get an extra wheat. Or during the refresh phase, gain a water. Something like that. Alternatively, you can build up your storage. You can build up your cookery. You can get endgame point additions. Things like for every 4-cost beer, get an extra gold. Something like that. To your beer or to your bread or whatever. And so looking at what you have and what you're able to make and when you're going to make it, and particularly when you're passing the cards, what you're passing, what's your opponent got in terms of the resources, can they make this? Well, I'll keep that and just I'll play it as an upgrade. I don't need it, but things along those lines. And it's very it's not super crunchy, but it's interesting enough decisions. It's quite Euro-gamey, and that you've probably seen some of this before. It just all comes together in a nice package. Let's put it that way. There's nothing hugely original in the game, but the way it all works together, it does work. You'll be spending turns where you're like, I just really need some different resources. I've got nothing I can build. Do I sack this off for resources and give some to my opponent, or do I just punt it as an upgrade and wait until I get another card? Something like that. So really solid. Played a couple of times. Definitely want to get some more of that to the table. It is a good 2-player game. Highly interactive. Well, not super interactive because it is a Euro, but as interactive as Euros get.
Let's get the draft, and it sounds like you can do a bit of hate drafting.
Yeah, and particularly if you're needing to go over on your resources, which you often will, timing that when your opponent's just filled up so they get nothing from it is satisfying. Which was another good game overall. And then I guess one final game is a Kickstarter that just arrived, and that is Tofu Shifu.
You talked about this earlier when the news, not this episode, but a previous episode.
So
you backed it, and it has already arrived?
Yeah, I mean, super efficient Kickstarter, right? Super great Kickstarter. This is published and designed by IE Board Game. They're like a 2-person band type thing, but they had everything pretty much in place. The artists I don't know, but the art is one of the main attractions of this game. I would say it's a chibi style Chinese tea house that you run. You are the Tofu Shifu of it, and you're trying to run your best tofu house, serving customers and making the most money. The game, however, is a race to complete 8 objectives. You only start with 4 objectives. You're going to have to make more or work towards different ones that come out. The game involves worker placement, it involves hand management, deck building, and resource management to a degree. On your turn, you will have cards in your hand. They are multi-use cards. Those cards can be used... on your turn, you must move your Shifu, who is your only worker, right, for the worker placement element, to another spot. So from wherever it is, has to move. The spots that go to require different hats. So it could require a chef hat. It could require a waiter's hat. It could require a... I forget what the last one is, a cashier's hat. To go to these different spots, and you'll be using that, playing those cards from your hand for those hats. or a Shifu hat, which is wild. I don't mean it's crazy. I mean you can use it for anything. And so you would go to a spot, and that spot may be build an upgrade. And so then on each of the cards, they have an upgrade function as well. And that could be make a different type of tofu, could be gain a different recurring hat. So you don't have to be spending cards all the time. So that's sort of your engine building element of it. You'll be put those out, and you'll have more actions going forward before you have to come home. Or it could be an upgrade to your tofu house where you can serve more tables. And the last thing you can use a card for, though, is also turn it into an objective, which will have certain types of tofu which you must serve to a single table to score it. So the multi-use cards. Other actions you can do would be to set something as an objective to replenish your tofu. So you start with 2 types of tofu, but remember you can upgrade to build more tofu. You can you can gain customers, attract customers, which is pulling into a bag of tiles and setting up a table with a left and right sides, which will tell you what the people want, which types of tofu. There's 4 different types of tofu.
What?
Yeah, there's like hard tofu, silken tofu, dry tofu, I don't know, stuff.
I only know normal white tofu and then deep fried tofu, which is the better one.
Oh, that's it. The fried tofu is the dried one, I think. You can clear the tables, which is how you get rid of the guests after you fed them, or you can serve them food, or you can recruit a new card, so build up your deck by going to certain spots. But eventually you'll run out of things to do because you won't have hats to move your Shifu around anymore. You've used your cards.
You've used all your hats.
Yeah, cards are on the board. You will refresh, you'll come home, you have the opportunity to buy cards. So when you go to the gain card spot, you get a card for free. However, you can pay up to 5 coins for one of the other cards. And then, unlike a normal deck builder where you'd shuffle and draw, you can take any 6 cards you want to your hand, or up to 6 cards. Often you'll only be playing with 4 or 5 until you've built up your deck. So round and round it goes. You've got 4 starting objectives, which everybody has the same. There are 2 random objectives put out first to get them. There are money objectives. You get money by serving customers and selling tofu, would you believe? So scaling 16, 18, 20, 22 coins to buy an objective, or the ones that you set yourself by serving people on the table. And the first person to get to 8 wins. You get an even number of turns in case somebody can catch up. Whoever has the most objectives at the end wins. And it's a perfectly pleasant and serviceable game. It's not going to see a huge amount of variety game in, game out. You'll always be doing the same thing. So it's really an efficiency puzzle, action economy. Now, if somebody's taken the space that you want, there's always the opportunity to spend additional hats to do that. But we only played it 2-player. At some point, you can only go there as a second player. If a third player wanted to take that action, they'd have to go to a special spot to do it, or they wouldn't be able to. And so even at 2-player, often the other player was where you wanted to go. You couldn't afford the 2 hats to go do the thing, or you didn't have the right hats or whatever. So deciding what order you're going to do things in, where your opponent might be on your next turn. There's enough decision there, but it is the light end of medium because it's got all these mechanisms together. It's the only thing that really makes it medium. And it just looks lovely, plays fine. I'm looking forward to playing it at sort of a higher player count. I think it could be a little cutthroat there, but it's not doing anything unique.
So the lighter end of 2, maybe on the medium weight scale.
Well, it's got 2.67 here. I don't think enough people have quite rated it yet. I think
it'll go down a bit.
I think it'll be 2.5-ish by the time it's done. Like the first time you do it, all these mechanisms seem it's a lot going into one, and sure, I guess that's what keeps up the weight. But actually, it's pretty simple once you get going. It's just worker placement to get a thing. Sure, you got to spend cards from your hand. That means you want cards. You need enough tofu to serve people. That means you want to go to the tofu spot. It's not super complex.
Well, do you know what? I've said it before when we reviewed Cthulhu Death May Die, the original Kickstarter box, I said, this isn't doing anything especially new. This isn't doing anything particularly innovative. I might actually revise that position because I actually think the sort of push your luck with the insanity sort of wiping you out at the end is actually not push your luck, but the management of the insanity track is actually probably more unique than I give it credit for at the time. But I said, you know what though, sometimes just being a solid package where everything works well and is enjoyable is enough.
Yep.
Not everything needs to push the envelope.
Looks great on the table. The Kickstarter came with the upgraded components, so it's all 3D printed, 2-color tofus.
But tofu's only white.
But the bowl it's in can be orange or blue.
Oh my god. Orange or blue.
Yeah. Depending what kind of tofu you're making. I just don't know if it's going to become a perennial favourite.
I think to achieve sort of a perennial status or to remain a staple of a collection, you need to have an amount of replayability that comes from variety or discovery or skill curve.
Yeah. And I don't think it necessarily is. It's not that it's a bad game. I just don't think it has too much of that.
Yeah, if it's got low player interaction and low variability, the chances of its replayability being particularly high are quite low.
Yeah, like the deck of cards that have all these functions on them, sure, it's a chunky enough deck of cards, but they're all functionally
quite similar.
Yeah.
You're not building sort of big, powerful combos or particularly seeking out specific cards or anything like that.
No. The game will probably follow a similar curve every time. You want to have some additional hats that are recurring every time you come home to refresh, because then you can use your cards on the other functions of the game, and so your turns get bigger. So you want a little bit of that. You need to be making the different types of tofu to serve all your different guests. So you're always going to have to do that. But you know the competition for the upgrade spot will then be more fierce at higher player counts. And then eventually you've got to turn that into objectives to score the points when you're doing it. So yeah, I think it will play out quite similarly every time, which can become a little boring, but it is fully functional and very pleasant.
Well, you know, it's also commensurate with the price, right? Like how many plays out of it do you think you'll need in order to feel like you got your money's worth?
Yeah, it wasn't terribly expensive as far as Kickstarters go. The Kickstarter was very well run. They had some problems with the metal coins, particularly in Canada. You can't ship coins to Canada, it turns out.
What? What? I never heard that.
And other places, including my own, there were no coins in it because they'd been opened to check what was... Because they're the yuan or whatever they're called, the circles with the squares in the middle.
Yeah.
So they'd obviously been opened and fell out. But they're replacing them, so...
Huh. Well, sometimes those things happen, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not mad about it. I even forgot it was that. Oh, the last thing, the insert was terrible. Other people haven't had a problem, but they came with sleeves. The game came with sleeves, but the sleeves don't fit in the insert. And the insert's also terrible that all your little tiles need to be in a bag, which you'd love to be able to store just somewhere. No, can't do that. You got to flatten everything out, and it was a terrible insert. I threw it away immediately.
Yeah, sometimes they've just got to go.
Well, it was a Kickstarter stretch goal, vacuum formed insert, and I said, well, sure, but it's useless.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've never ever encountered a really good vacuum form insert.
No, there's some that are functional at least.
There might be a rare minority that are functional for games with not a lot of components.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think Castles of Burgundy did an okay job, but...
Okay, so that is... But I mean, that's still...
Exception.
I think, yeah, I also think that's not very typical.
Yeah.
And it's particularly around like sort of games with lots of technical components like bags of tokens, cards, lots and lots of cards that you might want to sleeve, or... I mean, trying to please the people that don't sleeve cards and people that do sleeve cards with the same insert is impossible.
Yes, but you can just ignore the people that don't sleeve cards because they're idiots.
Well,
if that's you, leave a comment below.
There are ways around it. One of the things that Awaken Realms has done in the past with Ether Fields was to provide the sleeves in a box that then acted as the overflow for the cards. I mean, for a game like Ether Fields, that works where it's already a ton of boxes. Might not work with other games, but if you had, I don't know, maybe an optional second different kind of box.
Potentially, but if you're particularly because the game came with sleeves as well.
Yeah,
right?
I do think if you're selling your own sleeves, you should have an option to provide a workable storage solution that includes those sleeves, even if it's like a different insert that ships alongside the game. So it's like, okay, we're going to deliver everyone this one product, but if you buy the sleeves, we will flag up that they won't fit, and then we'll send out a different insert either free of charge or at a nominal fee.
No. Just give me a trough if you're not going to bother with a useful insert.
Yeah.
Fine. What else?
What else? Well, I've got one more game.
Do it.
Do you have any more games?
No, that'll do me.
Oh my god, then this is the final one. I mean, I've played more games this week, but this is the only one I've chosen to talk about, including Molly House. Mainly because the others were sort of games you should already know or have played. I've been playing a lot of classics recently. It's been really nice.
Snap.
Just really nice.
Monopoly.
I played, lighter games. I played a game of Skull. That was really nice. Played Slide. Ever played Slide?
No. Do you know what that is? I heard it's a classic.
A classic.
Why,
No, I'm trying to think of the games that I played that weren't maybe well-known classics. Slide is one of them. Anyway, we play. So I've been playing Rebirth, Reiner Knizia's Rebirth. This was a Kickstarter produced by Mighty Boards, designed by Reiner Knizia, published by Mighty Boards. It's a 2025 release as well. The art is by Anna Mikado.
Yep, good luck.
Przbliska.
No, that's wrong.
I had to say it while Barry was talking, so he'd drown me out. No one would know what I said. And I'm sorry. Can I call you Mikado, please? And Kate Vesner Redisiuk. This is, published by Mighty Boards via Kickstarter. It is a Reiner Knizia tile laying game. I like Reiner Knizia tile laying games. I like them a lot. We covered Blue Lagoon on the channel. We covered nothing else, actually, on the show, I think. But, just to list...
I like maybe 10, 15 of them.
Yeah.
Not the other 40.
Well, from the guy that puts out 300 games a year. But, yeah, seriously. The tile layers I really rate. Obviously, Tigris and Euphrates we covered in the very first episode. It was one of my top games. I really like that. I quite like Yellow and Yangtze and Huang as well. I prefer Tigris and Euphrates. Maybe that's first play bias. Yeah. But it does just feel a bit more weighty, a bit heavier than the other two. I actually, for some reason, prefer Yellow and Yangtze to Huang as well. So maybe it is just first in, first out. But, I don't know why Yellow and Yangtze just, again, feels like it's got a bit more crunch than Huang, even though it's identical. Mm-hmm. It's functionally the exact same game. So I really don't know why it would feel like that. Anyway, but those are the sort of the very player interactive, conflict-y tile layering games. It's also got Through the Desert, which is another classic, which is great. That's about sort of carving out areas of the desert that are going to be your territory and score you big points and not letting people do that. He's got Babylon, which
never played it.
It was a Kickstarter, and it became quite hard to find quite quickly. It's really, really good. You've got a sort of a hand of tiles, and you're sort of putting them out and trying to score these temples and building up these sort of farming areas. It's really, really good. Blue Lagoon, obviously we mentioned earlier, the one where you're sort of building routes, and then you're putting down these little villages, and then halfway through the game scores, and then everything comes off except for the villages, and now you have to do the same thing again, but now you're coming out of the villages, so the placement of those was important. It's really interesting in this sort of two-phase system. We played Cascadero recently, which I think I talked about on the podcast. Cascadero didn't really grab me. It's a game where you are sort of building these routes between little villages on the board, and then you are going to go up tracks, and there's these sort of ways to combo steps up the tracks by sort of triggering the positions on the tracks at the right times. But I just found that the tracks distracted. I liked the tile laying part, but I didn't like sort of just trying to really the tracks are what give all of the tiling context in that game.
Yeah.
And I just found that really reduced my enjoyment of it rather than improving it. I also found that it was sort of difficult to really encourage player interaction in that one. Like, I think if you're going to have sort of capacity to block people and eyeball what they're doing, you can in Cascadero, but it felt like the cognitive ask was too high for the sort of player interaction and enjoyment output, which is kind of funny because it's not a complicated game.
Yeah.
But it wanted me to do a lot of sort of eyeballing of tracks and the board state and calculations to fundamentally sort of get the same feel of what I'm getting from, say, Through the Desert, which is much, much simpler. Mm-hmm. And then there's Rebirth, which came out kind of the same time as Cascadero. I mean, Cascadero delivered earlier, but they were kickstarted not far apart. Mm-hmm. So one imagines Konieczka must have been working on them at the same time. In Rebirth, you've got this board of Scotland and a board of Ireland. They're slightly different versions of the game. Ireland is a more complex variant, by which what it really means is more player interaction.
Yeah.
So a little bit more to deal with. So you play Scotland first, and then you go on to Ireland. And it's a super simple game where, I mean, Rebirth is thematically you're rebuilding human society post-apocalypse. It's sort of like sort of future in which we've survived and we're rebuilding with green technology and stuff like that. It is inconsequential. It could have easily been medieval agriculture. It could have easily been anything else. I think this is just the sort of in vogue theme. And don't get me wrong, it's a theme I really like. I really like the idea of we survived climate breakdown and we're rebuilding in a way that's more sensible. I'm not sure that I think it's quite an optimistic future. I'm not sure it's one
not one we'll live to see.
Yeah, exactly. But I like that. But I mean, Earthborn Rangers does it way better. But that's a very thematic narrative game. Couldn't be different to this, which is it's an abstract tile layer. So that's thematically what you're doing, and the way you're doing it is you get a bag of tiles. The tiles have 3 types: settlements, energy farm, and food farm. Mm-hmm. So you are gonna on your turn play a tile and then draw one from the bag. So you're only ever playing one tile, and that is really important because it just makes it so fast. It's so fast and it's so punchy, and it's so quick around the table that it'll get back to your turn often before you've even remembered to draw your new tile. In fact, we have to sometimes be slow down, just be mindful of did everyone actually take their turn? You'll just get passed over people, but it's also because people are so excited to play their tile because
don't take my space.
Exactly. It's crazy. So there's no placement limitations. You can play into literally any space. Sorry, there are no placement restrictions that are restricted by your existing positions. Yes. So the board is hexes, and all the hexes are divided up, and the hexes are largely divided into towns, where you place the settlement tiles, energy areas, where you place the energy farms, food farm areas, where you play the food farms, and generic areas, where you can play either kind of farm. And then there's a bunch of other spaces that I might mention. We'll see. The point is, you're trying to build big contiguous areas of farm. So, you've got 3 lightning. You place 3 energy farms. You place a 4th energy farm, get 4 points. Place a 5th energy farm, 5 points. Food farm works the exact same way. Settlements are more like area control. So they're marked out already 1, 2, 3 spaces on the board. When each of your settlement tokens has a different number of houses on it, and that's kind of like your bid. So you put the 4 down into a 3 space area. When the other 2 spaces are completed, whoever has the most visible icons on their tokens will get the big score for completing the settlement, and everyone else will get less points. Mm-hmm. If you manage to close it off all yourself, you get all the places added up, which is very cool.
Cha-ching.
So yeah, big money. Then there's the single space settlements where if you put your token down, you just get points equal to the visible icons. So it's a way of sort of getting some points for that. There are, on the Scotland side, 2 sort of spaces to spice this up. There's castle spaces. That is, everyone's got castle tokens in their color, and whoever plays next to the castle space gets to put down a castle in their color, and then if somebody gets more tokens next to it, they take it over.
Tokens?
There's some.
Do you know if the little plastic bits? I'm sure we had plastic castles.
Oh yeah, plastic castles. Yeah. Sorry, but you have to put out the farm and settlement tokens next to the castle, and everybody. I mean, to be fair, like I've got the Kickstarter edition, which comes with all this really nice Rewood, I think it's called. The stuff that was the CG pioneered it in Kutnahora, and then they used it in SETI as well. It's sort of like repurposed wood that's been pressed together and painted. It's really, really nice. I really like it for board game components because it's got that sort of natural feel. It doesn't feel like plastic miniature. It doesn't feel like that cheap plastic stuff Simon use all the time. All the castles are like that. All the cathedral tokens are like that. All the tokens that you actually lay out are cardboard, and all of the nice components come in the retail edition.
Yeah.
The Kickstarter exclusive was that the punch board is thicker.
Are the blimps, so your score tracker?
Oh yeah, the
I
blimps.
think that might be.
Okay, so you get you get Rewood blimps to score on the score track instead of punch board tokens.
Yeah.
And you get baggies, which are actually really helpful. Maybe more on the baggies later. I don't know, but the baggies are great, and then the punch board is just thicker. So the Kickstarter edition really didn't do a whole lot that you're missing out on if you get the retail. Like I wouldn't be concerned about that. And certainly no gameplay is gate kept, which is the important thing. We like that. So you get to take over castle spaces. That's like a sort of an area control thing where you want to get the most in. And there's like sort of tiered tie breaks as well for, if people are tied up. That makes it really interesting and feeds into this sort of importance of prioritizing where you play. There's also cathedral spaces on the Scotland board, which when you play next to them initially give you a private objective that only you can see, and it's things like build the biggest farm or build along a coastline or something, and they're checked at the end of the game. The vast majority of your points come during the game, and there's a small amount of endgame scoring, which largely comes from those hidden objectives you've been picking up, if you've been picking them up, and also the castles and who controls them. And just the sort of the tightness of prioritizing where you place, what kind of areas you're going to build up, when you're going to score certain things, tied into the incredibly limited options you have because you've got one token. So if you really want to do a settlement and get that settlement tied off, well, maybe you can. Maybe you will have to wait 4 or 5 pulls before you get there, in which case you're probably not going to get to do it because someone else will have already done it. But just the sort of, I never feel frustrated by pulling a token that wasn't what I was hoping for. I do get very excited when I pull the token I wanted. But it feels so tight and it moves so quickly and everything feels sort of like crunchy and satisfying and prioritizing the spaces. I mean, this is a strong contender for like my game of 2025. I know we're only like 4 months in, but this game is really, really good. And I played it at 3 and 4, and it worked really well at 3 and 4. I lent it to someone in the group because they really, really liked it, and they played it 6 times at 2-player the next day, and they said it was great.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can't get it like I think a better sort of endorsement than that, really.
I mean the placing your tokens out in a way where you hope that you're not going to be blocked, or you can engineer it in a way where you're not going to be blocked by the time it comes back around to you because you want to continue your farm, you want to continue your energy farm. Making sure you get those objectives on the Scotland side is critical because some of them you might not be able to achieve. So getting all 6, I think, on the Scotland side give you the most options. 8, is really key. But other people can also see what you're doing. There's nothing hidden beyond what you're going to put down next.
Well, the objectives that you pick up are kept secret.
Yes. So
they don't know what you're doing, but they can sort of see what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and it's hard to mask that in some ways. If you're able to combine those, that's good. We had the same issue where people were jumping ahead in turn order because they just assumed it was their go again because we've been shouting at them for it's you again. What? Because it is so fast. Yeah, great game. I bought the retail edition. I didn't think there was enough in the Kickstarter that really warranted the extra, and they're very upfront about what you got in the retail edition versus the Kickstarter. Yeah, it's good.
Yep, it delivered really quickly. They clearly sort of finished it. They were just sort of doing functionally an order system
before GameFound's pre-order system was actually in place.
Yeah, and I mean the one useful thing I think. The most useful thing you get in the Kickstarter are the bags for players, because functionally you've got all those tokens, and what you want to do is put them out into a pool so you can pull them at random. But if you got a bag and you can pull them out the bag, that's a bit better.
Yeah.
But you can always just get your own bags,
or a cup or anything.
Yeah, or a cup or
anything you can fit your hand in.
Yeah, but the Ireland side is really good too. It's got first come first serve objectives, so it's got more sort of player interaction, people prioritizing which of those to go for, and then it's got the cathedrals have all been done away with, so you're no longer drawing private objectives to look at, but instead you've got these spaces that give you different benefits when you play next to them for the first time, so you're sort of prioritizing those. And the big thing really actually with the Ireland side, which might be the more subtle change, is that there's a lot more open spaces. So you can build these big contiguous farms, like they're not marked as either food or energy, and they're just bigger areas. And so if people aren't sort of conscientiously trying to stop you, you can be getting massive amounts of sort of exponential points by building up those areas. So there's a bit more of sort of, I think, a requirement to stop people just creating giant farms and scoring huge off that.
Yeah, as soon as you like 8 and everybody just looks at you.
Like, oh, shit,
no, I didn't even see it.
Yeah. I really like Rebirth. I think for sort of a middleweight, light to middleweight game that just plays really quickly. It says an hour. It plays in an hour. It scales really well at player count. And I think the one thing I was kind of bummed out about was that the number of objectives on the Ireland side are just enough that you can have the full offering of public objectives plus one for each player, because there is a way to pick up one private objective. So one for each. So there's 12 objectives, one for each player at 4. I would like to see just a few more private objectives, or sorry, a few more public objectives or whatever for the Ireland side, so that it just felt like there's a little bit more variety there. There's also 2 objectives on the Ireland side which reward you for building 2 farm areas, and we sort of worked out. Now, I can't say this for sure because, well, I understand that Konieczka is like the maths guy, right?
Yeah, he's
so I would be very surprised if this were true. But I was playing this with the folks I know from the university, and they're very up on their maths. And they were saying that actually, if you build these 2 farms to score this objective, and you score the objective, it's actually less points than if you'd build them all as one contiguous farm. So it's only really worth doing the objective if you're forced to separate the farms into 2 areas.
Which people shouldn't be letting you build all your farms together.
Well, true, but the objective, but I mean, to get more points, I think, than the objective is you need a chain of 6 farms, which is not that big in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. Like, I don't think it's that hard to do a chain of 6. So those the thing is, those objectives, particularly when you score them, when you pick them up as private on the Ireland side, are a little bit disappointing, because it really is kind of like, okay, this is only profitable if somebody blocks my small farm. And furthermore, it also is only scored at the end of the game, which means, like, because if it's a public objective, what you can do to sort of monopolize on it is build 2 sets of 3, and then you score the objective, and then you can join them up to benefit from the whole thing. If you can be clever about the timing on that and do it right, that's potentially quite a big thing. If you pick it up as your private objective, you can't do that because you need it to be true at the end of the game. So I kind of wish that I could get rid of those 2 objectives from the Ireland side and maybe just to have some different ones. Yep. So a few more cards to the Ireland side would have been great, but I'm really only critiquing that because I really like the game and I want a little bit more of it.
Nope, top tier.
Yep, definitely top tier. Really, really good.
Well, that's it for the first year.
Oh my God.
Ready Steady Podcasting. What does the next year hold, Mike? Give us a sneak peek.
Well, obviously, we always said we were only doing the podcast for a year, so that wraps
That's
it
it.
up.
Yeah.
It's done. Thanks everyone who came on this journey with us. Hope you've enjoyed it. No, we'll obviously be back here doing more and more podcast. Again, if there's something in particular you want to see, if there's a game of coverage you'd like to know more about, or anything like that, you can always get in touch with us at askreadysteadypodcast@gmail.com. The email's in the description. We're more than happy to sort of hear your thoughts and requests. Not saying we're going to do anything about it, but we're definitely always happy to hear the engagement. So thanks to everyone who has engaged with the podcast and, of course, who supports the show as well. You know, we think this kind of coverage of board games is really important, especially as the hobby gets increasingly broad and increasingly expensive. So we're endeavoring to bring you more and more of this kind of helpful coverage. At least I hope you found it helpful. And if you feel
helpful from my side.
Yeah, exactly. It's even more helpful once I've edited out all the crap. And speaking of which, that's only possible thanks to our wonderful supporters on the Patreon who help keep us able to get some equipment and enjoy this use of the equipment and things like that. So big thanks to them for supporting the show, and to you who have listened and watched us for a year. And we hope you enjoy the future as well and what we bring in the future.
Lovely. Well, thanks for joining. Till next time. Bye.